It's Liz Nugent here. And again, I want to start off by thanking Kilkenny County Council Library Service and the Ireland Reads campaign for inviting me to take part in this series. Ireland Reads is a national reading campaign as part of the government's Keep Well programme. Led by public libraries, the campaign places a focus on reading for pleasure, escape, mental stimulation and well-being. It is an invitation to everyone in the country to take some time during a particular week in February 2021 to experience the joys of reading and to share their experience with family, friends, book clubs, or online. The campaign culminates with national communications and events today. So for this part, I'm going to talk about, in the last part, I talked about my inspiration and reading and libraries and everything. Here I'm going to talk about writing, because I know so many readers would like to write or think that they might have a book in them. And I think it's true of a lot of people. You do have a book in you, but it's how to go about writing. So here are my top tips, if you like. First of all, read. Read broadly, read literary, read genre. That includes romantic, crime, horror, science fiction, whatever you're having yourself. Read children's stories, read poetry, read collections of short stories, read essays, because that's the way you'll find what kind of writing you want to do. If you want to be a writer, you have to find the kind of writing that appeals to you, because you cannot be a writer without first being a reader. And now we get on to begin. There's no time to start like now. Everybody has time to write 500 words a day. If you stop to do doom scrolling on your phone, if you stop your social media, if you turn off the television half an hour earlier, and get behind your laptop, or just with a pen and paper. That's the other thing. Writing is free. It's free. There's nothing to stop you doing it. So just begin, start. Goethe has this great quote, and he says, whatever you can do or dream you can do, begin it. Boldness has genius, power, and magic in it. Begin it now. So you don't even have to know what it is. Just start and see where the pen takes you. It's almost the hardest part of writing, but it's the most rewarding. Stop waiting until you have the time. You have the time now. In order to write, you don't need money. Pen and paper is enough to get you started. And I'm sure you can scratch up an old biro or a bit of a pencil on the back of an envelope if that's all you have. But really, there is no excuse. You can start writing today. Okay, inspiration. Inspiration can often come from real life, from history, from folklore, from rumor. I got a lot from obituaries, legends, other books. Now, I'm not suggesting you plagiarize other books, but certainly for Unraveling Oliver, for me, was absolutely inspired by the Book of Evidence by John Banville. Not that I would compare myself to John Banville, but still, that was the book that made me want to write. You can always think of family stories. Like, there's always stories within your family, and you kind of wonder, God, I wonder, was that true about what Uncle Michael said to me about my grandfather's cousin? There's always something in the family that you can write about and build a story around. You can build a story about impressions of the future, dystopian, like what's the world going to be like in 100 years' time? Does that interest you? Write about that. Inspiration can come from music. Like, my last two books were inspired by song lyrics. Our Little Cruelties was inspired by Stars, a song written by Janice Ian, if you just listen to the lyrics of that. And Skin Deep was inspired by a song called Lady of a Certain Age by Divine Comedy. And you can look those both up on YouTube. And if you've read the books, you'll understand why they were the inspiration. The next thing is characterization. Before I start to write my books, I have an idea of who my main characters are. Now, you don't have to do this for every character. Not, you don't have to do it for the waitress who delivers a cup of tea, or, unless she's a central character, and then you do. But you don't have to do it for the solicitor they go to visit to discuss the will. I'm talking about your main characters, your main players in the story, and you really should know them inside out. So I would always make a list for myself, and I would start with I would always start with, what would they do if they were home on their own on a Tuesday afternoon? What would they do? Would they, turn on the television and watch the golf? Would they start preparing dinner? Would they clean their children's rooms? Would they do the laundry? Would they download some porn? Would they listen to some music? Would they take out an old guitar? Like, you can really tell a lot about a person by what they might do if home on their own on a Tuesday afternoon. Also, what newspaper do they read? Do they like tea or coffee? Who would they vote for in an election? Are they an introvert or an extrovert? Do they like animals? Do they own pets? Do they grow up with animals as pets or on a farm? There's so many questions you can ask about your characters. Just think of all the things that you do in your daily life and apply it to your characters. And that way you will have a fully rounded character before you go to write them. And you don't even have to use any of these aspects when you're telling the story, but it's really useful for you to know that stuff about them so that you can call on it when you need it. And also you can keep the characters consistent. So if you have a character who is frequenting bars, he's not like gonna have a beer on a Friday night and then on the following night he's having a gin and tonic. That would be inconsistent. He's either a beer guy after work or a gin and tonic guy after work. Does he do shots at the end of the night? You can play with these things. I mean, it's not that he has to stick to one drink, but whatever you do, make it consistent. Okay, the next thing I want to talk about is dialogue. In real life, and I've often seen it in books, people who make long speeches at each other, where the dialogue is a paragraph long, 8 or 15 lines of dialogue. That's not very realistic. When we talk to each other, now, you could say, I am making a speech here now to you. So this is not dialogue because it's just me talking. But if I was talking to you directly one-to-one, we would be having a conversation and you would be interrupting me. And if it was just the two of us, we would be talking across each other. We would be interrupting each other. We would be cutting each other off. And that's quite an Irish thing. And I think you have to reflect that in your dialogue. So I think 2 or 3 lines of dialogue per person is plenty in a conversation. And remember that people interrupt each other, so make sure you represent that. And have the dialogue be naturalistic. The temptation is often to use big words or to use a very expansive vocabulary, but bear in mind who's talking. Like, does that person have a broad education, or does that person what kind of background does that person have? So if they grew up in a mansion, for example, and they went to Oxford University, they're bound to have a more expansive vocabulary than the average person. I think. I don't know, maybe I'm wrong, but I think you would reflect that, and they, their accent would be different, their intonation would be different. So reflect that and just get the dialogue right, and that will really help you with the character as well. Now, the next thing I'm going to talk about is structure. I'm not great at structure, I have to say, but I have found that in all of my books, and I learned this from Shakespeare, you don't necessarily have to start your story at the beginning, you know. Often starting with a major event and working backwards or forwards from that point is a good way to hook your reader. Start with a big incident. Now, this doesn't work for everybody, and all of what I'm saying here is only what works for me. It doesn't apply to all forms of writing, and it doesn't apply to to lots of forms of writing. But for me, who writes crime, I will always start with a big incident, like a death, a funeral, a dead body, a corpse on the beach, a man beating his wife, whatever it is. And then I work generally backwards from that. So I play out all of the circumstances and the incidents that led up to that point, and then I play out the consequences. And usually I do it through the eyes of the person who did the beating or who did the murder. But I also play out the consequences for the victims, because you can't just tell one side of the story. I mean, we should really see how it affects the other people in the story. So be careful of that. If you're writing a psychopath like I do, make sure you see how it affects the other people. That's one of the reasons I really hate the book American Psycho. Sorry, I never diss other writers, but that book just makes my skin crawl, because all we hear is the horror and we never hear about how it affects the victims. And well, mostly they're dead, but anyway, makes my skin crawl. Anyway, plot. Once you get your characters right, have them make bad decisions, and that's where you get your plot. And also look at the most obvious course of action for the character to take and find a way for that course of action not to be possible. So that way you will surprise yourself and you will surprise your reader, and your story will not be predictable. Maybe I should expand on that a little bit. I don't plot. I don't sit down. Now, a lot of people do. Again, this is just the way I do it. But a lot of people sit down and they have Post-it notes all over the wall, and they kind of go, they map out and say, okay, the first third of the book, this is going to happen, and second third of the book, this is going to happen, and the denouement is going to be about here, and I'll have my inciting incident here. I don't do any of that. I start with the characters, and I start with a big incident, a big traumatic incident, and I look at how the character reacts to that. My main character, how do they react to that? And that will tell you a lot about them and a lot about the situation. And then I have them make bad decisions about what they're going to do about this situation. And that's where I get my plot. I can't really, plotting is a really difficult one to talk about, because everybody does it differently. And if you want to be the person who puts up the Post-it notes and plots out your book and knows exactly where it's going from the get-go, good for you. Unfortunately, I always start my books never knowing how they're going to end. So it's always a surprise to me who's dead or who the corpse is, or, I never plot my books. So I just pretty much make it up as I go along, but that doesn't work for everybody. Some people like to have a really good idea of where it's going so they can write in a prescribed way, and you know, there's a lot to be said for that, because my way is a lot more nerve-wracking and probably a lot more difficult. So choose the easy option if you can. Unfortunately, I'm just not one of those people. The other thing I will say to you is keep going. Every day that you write, no matter how bad it is better than the guilt you feel when you don't write. So you might as well write. Now, those wise words were told to me by Marion Keyes, and who better to tell you how to, you know, not give up. I think almost everybody hits a wall. Your average novel is about somewhere between 80 and 120,000 words. And almost everybody hits a wall at about 20,000 words. And they go back over them and they start editing them and refining them incessantly, going backwards and forwards, and like finding new things in those first 20 or 30,000 words, and going backwards and forwards and backwards and forwards, and refining and editing. I would say stop that, move forward. If necessary, skip to the bit skip to the bit you are sure about, or go to the ending and then go back and fill in the rest later. The delete key is not your friend on a first draft. Keep going forward. Don't when you hit the wall at the 20 to 30,000 word mark, keep going, because really there's so much more to be gained than going forward, than going back over and over and over what you've already written. I mean, you can make it perfect, but it's not a book at 20 to 30,000 words. It's not finished. So keep going. I have a word here called pictures, which means keep it visual if you can. You want to take your reader on a journey of the imagination. So show them the high life and the low life. Create visual imagery without relying so much on description, but more on the characters' reactions. The next thing I will say is finish it. There are thousands and thousands of unfinished manuscripts on laptops and floppy disks and old folders shoved at the back of drawers. You are not a novelist until you have finished writing a book. Never mind about publication. Okay, so now you've finished writing a book. Are you a writer? Not yet. There is still a lot more work to do. So do not submit your first draft. If you have just finished it, put it away for a month or two, and then take it out again and start rewriting. Make it as good as it can be. Make it a final draft as far as you're concerned. Don't send anything with room for improvement, because you're just giving the agent an excuse to reject it straight away. Take your time. When you are signed by a publisher, then you will get deadlines. But on your first novel, take as long as you want. I took 6 or 7 years to write Unraveling Oliver. I had a full-time, full-on day job as well. But I mean, I took my time. I really did. I mean, too much time, because for 2 or 3 of those years, I did nothing at all, because I stopped at the 20,000 mark and like just put it away, because I didn't see the point in finishing it. And then eventually I got the impetus back to finish it. Okay, so you have rewritten your book. Okay, now you're a writer, if you have given that. Okay, then next step, don't submit it yet. Give it to some trusted friends who are good readers, not your best friend or your wife or your mother, but someone who you trust to tell you the truth, the brutal truth. Act on their advice. Do not ignore their notes. Fix the problems and then read it again and tweak as you go along to make it even better. I can't emphasize enough that your book needs to be in really good shape before you submit. When you get a book deal and an editor, he or she will definitely want changes, and you have to be willing to work with that person, even though you've already made it perfect as far as you're concerned. That editor will have more experience than you in this area, and you must trust their instinct. If you don't want to make changes, you're in the wrong game. You shouldn't be writing. You have to be willing and open to an editor's ideas, because they are only there to help you and to improve your book. Submit to agents, not publishers. What I did was I found out the names. I just Googled, my favorite writers, and I put in their name and agent and found out who represents the writers I most admired, and also what genre are you? What type of writing have you done? So, because you should really be familiar with other writers within your genre, so that you know not what the competition is, but what the current style of that writing is. So if psychological thrillers are the thing today, that doesn't mean that by the time you get published, because believe me, from the time that you get accepted to by a publisher to the time you get published could be 2 to 3 years, and that type of writing might have gone out of fashion. So be aware of the genre that you're writing in. When you find the agents you want to submit to, check out their websites and find out their submission criteria and follow it to the letter. Some want the first 50 pages, some want the first 10,000 words, some want the full manuscript. Send them exactly what they ask for, no more, no less. With your manuscript, send a query letter. One paragraph to describe your writing experience and any success you have had in that area. That will include screenplays, poetry, children's stories, literally anything you have ever had published or broadcast, any awards or shortlisting, anything at all. If you write the local newsletter for your bridge club, include that you have experience of writing and people have read your work. The next thing I would include is one paragraph of flattery to your agent. For example, I have chosen to submit to you because of your excellent reputation and because you represent some of my favorite writers, including, and then name those writers, because everybody likes to be flattered. It gives them a warm feeling towards you immediately. And then the next paragraph should briefly describe your book: theme, concept, genre. Here's the thing I'll say: always use the word commercial when you're describing your book, because the agent wants to make money out of you, so you have to convince them that people will want to read this. And then one paragraph on general stuff. You can compare yourself to other writers, but you might be better off to state what makes you stand out, what makes this story original, who is target audience for this book. Is it, lovers of Emily Bronte will love this book, or people who like Marion Keyes will. I think this will appeal to the readers of Marion Keyes and Patricia Scanlon and whoever, and then you end it with, thank you so much for taking the time out of your busy schedule to read my submission, and I look forward to hearing your feedback in due course. Now, you may have to wait 3 to 4 months to hear anything. That's generally the waiting time. And it's unwise to send out to more than about 4 agents at a time, because they talk to each other and they might be a bit annoyed to find out that you have submitted to others. They want to be the only ones you submit to. So the other thing is, if then you're lucky enough and you're in your first 4 tranche agents that you have sent out to, if one of them agrees to represent you, sorry, let me rephrase that. If more than one agent offers to represent you, no matter how big or small the agency is. Go with the agent who is the most enthusiastic about the book, because the more they love it, the better they will be able to sell it. It doesn't matter if they're a small agency in Dublin or if they are a massive agency in New York. Go with the person who loves it the most, because they are the people who will be able to sell it. Leave everything else to the agent after that. But once you decide to go with an agent and sign the contract with that agent, immediately write to the other agents that you have submitted to and let them know that you have secured representation and are now withdrawing your submission, because you don't want another agent to come along once you've signed a contract and find out that you've already signed with somebody else, because that will annoy them. And plus, you might need a blurb, for example, from that agent's client in 5 years' time, and you have annoyed that agent, and they will remember the ones who annoy them. They will remember the ones who annoy them more than the ones who they just ordinarily reject. So just be really careful about how you approach agents and handle them. There will be rejections along the way. Once my agent submitted my book to publishers, I had 19 rejections that I know of. There was probably more, but I asked her to stop telling me after 19. Agents will reject you and publishers will reject you, but it's like dating and you just have to find the one. So I hope that helps you on your writing journey. And whether or not you actually follow any of those rules, they're not rules. They're just what worked for me. So I think I can safely say there are no rules. So I hope some of that might have been helpful to you. And if not, go your own way. Go your own way. And if you don't want to write a book, that's fine. Just read them. Reading is as good as writing. And I wish I could be paid to read the books, because it's so much easier than writing them. Good luck and thank you all. Wash your hands, stay safe, keep your distance. Thank you so much.